I rise to express my deep appreciation to my colleagues, Senator Stabenow and Brown, and to the Majority Leader for the bipartisan work that was done to remove a harmful and economically costly financing provision from the bill that's currently before this body. I had significant concerns with a provision in the pending highway bill, which could have impaired the economic recovery in my home state of Michigan and in states across our country. I am a strong supporter of programming to invest in our nation's infrastructure, and much of the substance of this bill is absolutely essential. I applaud the work that has been done on a bipartisan basis to achieve a compromise, something that happens too little here in Washington. And while I believe Congress must make smart investments in our nation's roads, bridges, and infrastructure, I also believe that we must do so in a responsible way that does not hamper the economic recovery occurring in our states. There are numerous financing policy alternatives available to lawmakers to fund infrastructure investments, but the drafters of this legislation originally chose to pay for infrastructure investments in part by asking some of the hardest hit communities in our nation and in my state to bear the burden. I'm talking about a provision in the original bill and in the substitute which would have eliminated an important economic recovery program called the Hardest Hit Fund in order to help pay for the infrastructure investments contained in this bill. The Hardest Hit Fund has successfully supported efforts by local lenders to promote economic revitalization and renewal after the deepest and most painful housing and financial crisis in modern history. The Hardest Hit Fund helps states and municipalities invest in their citizens and in their communities. And according to the most recent data reported by the state of Michigan, the Hardest Hit Fund has assisted more than 25,000 of my constituents in preserving their piece of the American dream, their family home. Not only are these funds being used to keep eligible families in their homes, but these dollars have also been put to work improving neighborhoods that have been devastated by urban blight resulting from America's most recent economic challenge. In Michigan, we know the impact that abandoned properties can have on economic renewal. Blight is not just ugly, creating eyesores and dragging down surrounding property values. Empty homes and buildings also serve as way stations for criminals and drug dealers and further discourages outside investors and homeowners from taking a chance on a neighborhood that has been affected by blight. That is why local leaders have been working with the nonprofit and private sectors to identify and eradicate blight in our communities. Several thousand blighted properties have been demolished or removed thanks to Michigan's partnership with the Hardest Hit Fund, and thousands more are in the pipeline to be addressed in the near term. Thanks to the work done to address blight, homeowners are investing again in neighborhoods. Urban farming and greening and beautification efforts are well underway with businesses and nonprofits and local school children transforming their communities one block at a time. Some of the impacted cities have already made investments in the area in anticipation of reimbursement from Hardest Hit funds. It would have been unfair and an inappropriate breach of our agreement to pull the rug out from under these cities at this stage in the game. That's why I worked with Senators Debbie Stabenow and Sherrod Brown to offer an amendment to strike this provision in the highway bill that would have rescinded the remaining Hardest Hit Fund monies from communities that most desperately need them. Congress must come together and pass a multi-year transportation bill that makes smart investments to upgrade our country's crumbling infrastructure, but it would have been unacceptable to fund this plan at the expense of the communities in Michigan and in other states that rely on Hardest Hit funds to eliminate blight and improve their local neighborhoods. This proposal not only risked future blight removal funds, it could have left cities across Michigan on the hook for millions of dollars already outlaid for blight removal projects. As legislators, it's important that we first do no harm when making policy. In considering this highway bill, it is important for us not to harm the very communities we are aiming to help by advancing infrastructure policies. It was important for us to act to avoid impairing the economic renewal that is underway in places like Detroit, Flint, Grand Rapids, Saginaw, Pontiac, and other communities across my state. Elimination of the hardest hit funding would have been harming families, businesses, schools, and entire communities that are relying on public-private partnerships to transform their communities. For these reasons, I was prepared to oppose the legislation that we are considering today because I believe these changes would do damage to the economic recovery in my state. I could not in good conscience support this legislation under those conditions. But thanks to the unwavering dedication of my colleague, the senior senator from Michigan, Senator Stabenow, and the cooperation of the majority leader, we were able to find a way forward that avoids disruption to this important program and avoids devastating economic outcomes in cities across my state. This is what the legislative process should be all about here in the Senate. We were able to come from a point of major disagreement, and through intense and respectful discussion, we were able to agree on a workable solution. This process has demonstrated that colleagues on both sides of the aisle can work together to prioritize the needs of their constituents while also advancing the economic interest of our country. I look forward to further consideration of this important legislation. Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the remainder of my remarks appear elsewhere in the record.
Without objection.